Devon wouldn't have been surprised if Kelsey hadn't shown up after school. He thought Kelsey might suspect something, but nope, apparently he didn't, because he was already waiting behind the school with Mick and Devon when Devon let the thick metal door slam shut behind him. Good. So far so good. So where is this place? Kelsey asked, squinting into the relentlessly bright sun and strolling toward the other boys. It's kind of in the woods, about a mile east of the railway yard, Devon said as the boys walked away from the school. How come we've never heard about it? Mick asked. We've both lived here since we were born, he said to Kelsey. Devon shrugged. Dunno. With Devon in the lead, the boys carefully picked their way through the railway yard, stepping across the rails behind a string of lumbering metal freight cars. Freight? Rolling along the tracks. On the far side of the yard, Devon led them into the woods, and they picked up a winding, uneven trail lined with rotting moss-covered logs and thick clusters of huckleberry bushes and salal shrubs. The air was moist and rich with a loamy smell that made Devon think of rainy days. He liked rainy days for the same reason he liked cloudy days. Mick and Kelsey chattered as they walked, mostly about TV shows. Mick was going on about a sci-fi show that followed an apocalyptic society in which people were killed for even the smallest mistakes. That sounds interesting, Kelsey said. Kind of up in my alley, in an extreme way. What do you mean? Mick asked. Kelsey shrugged. Oh, I just mean I like legal shows, courtroom dramas. I'm going to a law school so I can be a real judge someday. A real judge? Devon wondered what that meant. You don't want to be a builder like your dad? Devon asked. Nope, I like building things, but I'm kind of keen on justice. Dad gets that. He says we all need to do what we're passionate about. That's true, Devon thought. About 100 yards before they reached their destination, the trees thinned, and the sun's rays touched their skin. Devon felt the light and heat hit his face, and for a second, his feet faltered. You okay? Kelsey asked. Yeah, I just tripped. As fast as it intruded, the sun retreated. Devon turned off the trail and ducked into a denser, darker part of the woods. The other boys followed him. Are we there yet? Kelsey asked, then laughed. My sister always asked that when we were in the car. Mine too, Mick said. Devon ignored them. They were almost there. He led them around the gnarled spruce, and there it was. He stopped and waited for Kelsey and Mick to catch up. When they did, he heard them suck in their breath in unison. Whoa, Kelsey said. Creep-tastic, Mick said. Kelsey laughed. Hunkered in the woods in front of them, a big, low-slung building with a shallow roofline and small boarded-up windows clung, barely to life. Although the building was intact, it sagged and leaned, like it was getting too tired to stay standing. Because a bubble-shaped, filthy but unbroken skylight bulged from the middle of the top of the building, it looked like it wore a bowler hat. It was hard to tell what colour the building had been when it was built. Now it was mostly green and black, streaked with mould, mildew and moss. It was also being consumed by wild blackberry bushes. Aggressive, prickly regiments of the vines flanked the building on all sides. The boys could see from where they stood. The vines grew low, barely reaching the bottom of the building's few windows, but they were thick, compacted together in a barrier that would demand a blood sacrifice to get past. You don't expect us to go through those, do you? Mick asked Devon. Devon laughed. Do I look stupid? He laughed harder. Wait, don't answer. His laughs were high-pitched, kind of girly. Mick was looking at him strangely. Come on, Devon said, leading the boys around the building. What was it? Kelsey asked. Devon gestured at the wall they were passing. An old faded sign hung askew from under the weather-worn eaves. The sign was so faded you could only make out an F, an A, a Z, and a P. But next to the letters, the image of something round to find the elements. Is that a pizza? Mick asked. I think so, Devon asked. I think it was a pizzeria. I love pizza, Mick told Kelsey. Kelsey smiled. Me too. Hey, Mick, pull out your cell phone and see if you can find anything about the place. I'll do it, but I forgot my phone at home. I realised it after lunch. I don't think I've ever done that before. I feel naked without it. Mick laughed and pulled out his phone. Don't bother, Devon said. There's no cell service around this building. Mick held up his phone and turned in a circle. Well, that's a little spooky-o. Come on, Devon motioned for the boys to follow him around the opposite side of the building. When his running shoes started making scraping sounds instead of the dull thuds they had made in the forest, he gestured at the ground. See, I think this was the parking lot. Yeah, look. Kelsey pointed to the far side of the lot at a sign tacked to a tree trunk. Probably once white, it was now grey, but when Devon squinted, he could see the letter. Storm is on? Customers only, Kelsey said. Should we be here? Mick asked. Devon glanced at him. Why not? Does it look like anyone else here cares about this place? Besides, no one ever cared that we hung out in the abandoned gas station. He's got a point, Kelsey said. Come on over here, Devon said. Although this side of the building looked like it was just as choked by blackberry bushes as the other side, Devon knew better. He stepped over a chunk of broken concrete and bent over. Do what I do, he said to the others. Bent almost double. Devon poked his head into what looked like an impassable blackberry bush. But once he got close, it was clear that the bush was growling around something. Devon didn't have any idea what the something was, but it had an opening. He dropped to his knees. You have to crawl, he called back to the other guys. Mick groaned, but Kelsey shrugged and said, That's the life of an urban explorer. Devon grinned. Kelsey was wearing jeans with torn knees. Devon was sure they were the kind you had bought already torn. The kind that cost $100 at least. More than his mum would ever pay for a pair of jeans. It will be worth it, I swear. Just go slow, Devon encouraged. He crawled forward. He knew Mick and Kelsey would follow him. They were too curious not to. After about 4 feet of tunneling through a narrow opening, he reached a place where he could stand up. So he did, brushing off his legs as he waited for the others. He looked up and around. He wasn't sure what this was. It was a rounded enclosure like some sort of novelty entrance maybe, to the restaurant. He thought part of the entrance had collapsed, which was what had made for that tunnel-like way in, and what had protected this part from the weather and the forest's damp air. This is awesome sauce. Awesome, Mick said, popping up next to Devon. His breath smelled like his favourite grape soda, and his hair smelled like sweat. Kelsey got to his feet and looked around. Devon noticed that one of Kelsey's knees was bleeding. What is it? Mick asked. We used to live by the ocean, Kelsey said, and there was this big gift shop that had a shark's head at the entrance. I think this is like that. Not a shark, obviously, but some kind of animal head. See, there are the eyes. Devon looked up at where Kelsey pointed. He'd missed that when he was here before. To give himself credit, the first time he was here, it was dark. That was Friday evening. He'd wanted to find an abandoned building before Kelsey's buddy from his last town could. So he'd headed out after dinner. His mother had fallen asleep on the sofa, as she always did. He'd gone into the woods to explore. He wasn't sure why he went at night. Maybe he'd hoped to get lost. He hadn't really cared. He just wanted to forget what happened this afternoon. But instead of being lost, he found this place. As he explored it, an idea formed. He'd nurtured that idea all day Saturday and through Sunday morning brunch with his mum. When she fell asleep again, he returned and poked around some more, and his idea grew into a full-fledged plan. The eyes, Kelsey pointed out, were 2 round, dirty windows placed where eyes would be if this was, in fact, a head, and the place where the collapsed area lay was where an animal's snout might be. I think you're right, Mick said. Mick turned around and gestured at the boarded-up door. He said to Devon, So now what? On the left side of the door, 2 boards leaned against the wall. Devon reached out and moved the boards, revealing a sidelight window next to the door. The glass in the sidelight was broken out. Did you do that? Mick asked. Sure did. Want to take me to jail? Mick frowned at it. You expect me to get through there? Admittedly, the sidelight was narrow, but Devon had slipped in it with no problem, and he figured even Mick could exchange it if he sucked in his stomach and they gave him a push. "Yes, I do. That's why I bought this." He pulled from his backpack a roll of duct tape, and while Mick and Kelsey watched, Devon covered the inside of the window frame, which had held the glass, with the thick tape. "This way you won't cut yourself when you squeeze through," he told Mick. Kelsey stared at Devon for a couple of seconds, then said, "Thoughtful." "Yeah, thanks," Mick said. "That's me," Devon thought. "Mr. Nice Guy." When he was done taping, he turned sideways and slid through the opening. Once inside, he called, "Even though that skylight is dirty, it lets in enough light to see, mostly. Mick, why don't you go next? I'll pull you if you get stuck, and Kelsey, you push." "Okay," Mick and Kelsey chorused. Mick's soft, round shoulder pushed through the opening. He flailed out a hand, and Devon grabbed it and pulled. "Ow!" Mick protested as he escaped the opening and stumbled to get his balance. Kelsey slithered through behind Mick. "You okay?" Mick rubbed his belly. "Yeah." They all looked around. "Coolfulness," Mick said. Oh god, Mick. They stood in the middle of a huge square room lined with pictures of funky animal characters alternating with crazy and colourful geometric patterns. A domino-like stack of chairs sat against one wall, and another stack of tables lined the other wall. At one end of the room, a stage, its red velvet and fringe curtains pulled back, presided over the room, and on the stage, creevy, Mick was rooted to the dirty red linoleum floor. His gaze latched onto the three figures on the stage. "What is that? A chicken?" Kelsey asked, gawking in the same direction. "I think so," Devon said. "Why does it have a cupcake?" Mick asked. "Maybe it's a baking chicken," Kelsey said, and immediately guffawed. Devon couldn't help himself. He laughed. "Good one." Mick laughed too. "Yeah," his stomach growled. "I wish that was a real cupcake." "Come on." Kelsey walked toward the stage. Good, he was getting into it. Devon smiled. He and Mick followed Kelsey to the stage and looked at the figures closely. The figures seemed to be looking back at them, but of course, that wasn't possible. Devon had to admit he was more comfortable being here today than he had been the day before. Yesterday, he'd been spooked. He only came back today because... "They're animatronic," Kelsey said. "Yeah," Devon said. "That's what I thought." "Animatronic? Like robots?" Mick asked. "Sort of," Kelsey said. "Animatronics can be powered in different ways. Sometimes they use pneumatics, or... sorry, I don't know what that word is. Or hydraulics. Sometimes electricity. Sometimes they're computer-driven." "How do you know all that?" Devon asked in spite of himself. "Dad worked on an amusement park... Dad worked on an amusement park resort project once. They had animatronic birds." "Why a chicken, a rabbit, and a bear?" Mick asked. "A chicken, a rabbit, and a bear walked into a pizza joint," Kelsey said, and all three boys laughed. Kelsey was a funny dude, Devon had to admit. Too bad he had to go and... Mick gasped. "Is that a hook?" To the left of the stage, a cave-like protrusion shrouded in a black heavy curtain announced itself to be Pirate's Cove. Devon hadn't looked behind that curtain. Something about that hook. "Come on," he said. "There's more to see." Like a short conga line led by Devon's flashlight, the boys did a tour of the dirty pizza place. When Devon had first explored the pizzeria, he felt he'd been dropped in some kind of time warp. Although the interior of the building was damp and there was mildew in places on the ceiling and walls, it didn't have the trashed look you'd expect in an abandoned building. It seemed like the restaurant had been closed and no one had been inside of it since. They found the kitchen stripped of its appliances and other equipment, but oddly it had several jugs of distilled water lined up on the floor by one of the walls. A small office with an old scratched metal desk has also had a filing cabinet that was intriguingly locked. If Devon didn't hand over the plans, he would want to break it open. Kelsey suggested it, but Devon said that they'd get to that later. He led the other boys to a room with banks of control panels and ancient chunky computer screens, and then they visited a couple disgusting bathrooms with broken tile, cracked sinks and exposed pipes. While they were in the bathroom, Devon was pretty sure he heard something slithering through the walls. He didn't say anything. From the way the other boys' faces paled, he knew they heard it too. They didn't mention it either, but they all quickly crowded through the bathroom door and ended up back in the narrow hall. "The best part is down here," Devon said, motioning the others to follow him. Devon's heart rate picked up speed. He could almost hear his adrenaline revving at the starting line. He suppressed a smile. Why did he think of that? He wasn't into cars. 6.2 litre V8, he sing-songed in his head. "Storage?" Mick asked. "This is what you want to see." "Sorry?" Devon grinned. "Yeah, come on." He pushed the door into the storage room open, shined his flashlight into the room, and stepped back so they could see. It was like looking into some deranged person's closet. Headless animals hung on long rods that lined two walls of the room. Well, okay, not actually headless animals, but headless animal suits. The suits were dingy and dusty, some were dark with mildew. They all looked stiff and ragged and ratty with fur missing in places. On the opposite wall, 3 rows of shelves held animals' heads, bears and rabbits and birds and dogs. Every head looked a little battered, like it had been used as a bowling ball or something, but the eyes were in place, all of them. They all stared straight ahead, like they were lined up for roll call. "Screepy," Mick said. Devon looked at Kelsey. Kelsey's eyes were bright. He started poking around in the cabinets that lined the walls on the other side of the door. "Look at all this stuff," he said. He pointed at the bins of nails, screws, brackets, wires, and what looked like metal joints. He whirled and grinned at Devon. "You're a genius, Devon. I think I can salvage one of those suits and maybe build our own animatronic character for my hangout." Devon couldn't help but notice the use of the word "my." Last week, Kelsey said "our." A sound similar to rushing water filled his ears. He was pretty sure it was blood racing through his veins in excitement. "Look over here." He gestured for Kelsey to follow him and went to the back of the room to a small corner closet. His feet made raspy scuffs along the floor that sounded bizarrely menacing. Devon had found the closet when he was here the first time, partially hidden behind the costumes hung on the inner wall of the room. He'd seen the potential in it, and that had given him his idea. However, it was his second visit that had locked it down, so to speak. Kelsey glanced at Devon, then grasped the closet's metal handle. Stepping back and to the side, he slowly pulled the door open a few inches. Satisfied nothing was going to jump out at him, he opened the door the rest of the way. Devon's flashlight beam reflected off a pair of big round eyes. Mick crowded in behind them. "What's that?" Kelsey reached for the arm of the human-sized yellow bear standing in front of them. Ooh. Devon knew what he'd discover. The arm was heavy. This wasn't just a furry suit like the ones hanging on the rods. This suit was... It's an animatronic suit, Kelsey said. It has animatronic, abilities, I guess, but it can be worn as a costume. I've read about some cutting-edge stuff that they're doing with these, where you get in and the suit reads your vital signs and responds to your pulse and temperature and stuff. Some can even respond to specific commands. Let the wearer speak in the voice of the character. I'm sure that's not what this is, though. It's too old. I wonder how it works. He pulled on the arm again. "Let's get it out, in the open. I think it will take all 3 of us." "Sure," Devon said. "We can do it." This was going to be even better than he imagined. He thought he was going to have to talk Kelsey into this, but it looked like he was going to do it all on his own. It was like it was meant to be. The 3 boys grunted with effort, Mick sneezing a few times when dust and tufts of the bear's fur came loose. Working together, they managed to get the bear suit out of the closet and over to the middle of the storage room floor. They laid the bear on its back. Panting to catch their breath, they gazed at the strange character whose sightless eyes looked straight up in the ceiling in the middle of in the model of Devon's flashlight and the room's dark shadows. "Let's drag it all out to the main room so we can see it better," Devon suggested. "Yeah," Kelsey said. More grunting and sneezing got the yellow bear suit into the main part of the pizzeria. Once they had it in the middle of the floor, Devon knew it was time. Mick, why don't you go back and find lids to those bins of screws and stuff? You can stack them up and bring them out. We can take it with us for Kelsey's hangout. Mick looked over his shoulder at the gloomy hallway. Take my flashlight, Devon said. Mick looked back at the bear. Devon could see Mick shudder. Okay, he agreed. As soon as Mick left the room, Devon said to Kelsey, That bear looks like you. Ah.